Police Squad in color. Starring Leslie Nielsen. Also starring Alan North. And Rex Hamilton as Abraham Lincoln. Tonight's special guest star, William Conrad. Tonight's episode, Dead Men Don't Laugh.
Welcome to From the Files of Police Squad in color. I'm your host, Mike White. Joining me, of course, is Mr. Mark Begley.
I do not have a clever catchphrase this episode because there were no clever catchphrases this episode.
Oh, come on. Married one child. That didn't work out, so he married a grown woman.
That was the best gag in this entire fucking episode.
Yeah.
So good.
That was a little too long to use, so that's the only one I have written down.
And, of course, joining us as well is Mr. Chris Dashew.
You've caught me in the middle of my midnight routine, which includes applying Dick Clark's secret formula youth cream to my face.
Thanks, Johnny. We are talking about the final episode of Police Squad, but don't worry, we'll be back. I'm saying that right now. We'll be back next week talking about Naked Gun. But for now, we're talking about Testimony of Evil, which was the last episode produced, the last episode aired all the way back in July of 1982, July 8th to be exact, directed by poor Joe Dante, who was just given a big old shit sandwich by Tino Insana and Robert Wuhl. I'm sorry, I'm telegraphing it right now. Not a fan of this episode as much as others. Yes, there's a couple really good lines, a couple good bits, but overall, this one left me the coldest of every episode.
I did not like Dick Miller could not save this episode.
Yes, Dick Miller. Oh my God. It was so great when he showed up. I love Danny Dayton, who plays the stand-up comedian / drug runner who gets killed, but he's barely in this episode.
Yeah. It's not funny.
No, it's not. I mean, they try and they get some places of this whole thing of Frank being this ultimate comedian entertainer thing is pretty good, but yeah,
Is it?
It went on
Doesn't it kind of
way
go on?
too
I was like, wait a second.
I
Mike,
wrote, this
hold
is
the
a time
phone.
suck.
Yeah.
There was like 20. It felt like the entire episode took place in that nightclub with the camera on Leslie Nielsen the entire time.
All right.
And that's that mugging I don't like. And I know he's acting that way on purpose, but yeah, it rankled me.
Kind of where we're going with all of this.
Mhm.
By the time we get to the end of the third movie, I feel like we're on a roller coaster right now. We're at the bottom here. We're going to go back up for the first movie. Going to hit a little bit of a lull for the second movie, and that's going to be the track's not even finished, and we're just plummeting into the oblivion with the third movie. This is as low as we're going to get until we get to the third movie. Just pre-prefacing all of this.
So I said on our first episode where we talked about Police Squad, so the second episode of this series, I believe, I talked about how William Conrad was supposed to be in that episode, that he's in the script. Well, they finally got him, but they didn't write a new gag for him. He's being thrown out of a moving car, which is the exact same thing that happened to Lorne Greene in the first episode. It's like, come on,
really
guys.
Funny. It was really funny that time.
They could have used the John Belushi gag that they had to throw out that they filmed and couldn't use.
Man.
For those of the listeners that don't know, what is the John Belushi gag?
The John Belushi gag, he went to them and wanted to be, I guess, one of the guest stars that gets killed during the opening credits. And his idea was the camera would pan over to a body on the ground with a needle in its arm. And they said, no, we're not going to do that. And so, thank God. So it turned into like a mob hit where you see concrete blocks going down in the water and then the chains and then Belushi's body. And apparently he choked for real during that. And then when they brought him up, everybody was giving their obits. Oh, remember John Belushi for this, and that. His time in Saturday Night Live and Animal House, and he died of a drug overdose a couple months after that. But before that was aired, they were able to pull it. And I'm not sure which episode it was supposed to go with.
Oh, maybe it was this one.
It could have been. Yeah.
Yikes. Yeah.
Dodged a bullet on that
Somebody's got that film somewhere, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Maybe they had the heart to destroy it back then. Who knows?
Yeah. Wow. That's something.
Well, it's like when they were doing all that Chris Farley stuff about him being an alcoholic on SNL. It's like, hey, guys, you're not helping.
Right. Oh,
and not only are you not helping, you might be making this worse.
Yeah. Weird.
Yeah. So this one is, like I said, there's a drug runner who works at a nightclub. Basically, this whole nightclub, Mr. V's, is a front. I don't know why it wasn't that Flamingo Club. That would have been pretty cool.
That would have been a nice callback.
Yeah. But no, instead it's Mr. V's, which doesn't make any sense because it's a woman that owns it, whatever.
Is it Mr. V's? Is that supposed to be mysteries, or is it supposed to be like Mr. V's as in Mr. Vaginas?
Yeah, I don't know.
Is that what it is? Because like either
it.
way, it's not funny.
It wasn't funny at all. No.
One is lower bottom of the barrel humor, and one is like just a one tier above it.
Right.
They kept showing the sign, and it was always kind of a severe close up, and it wasn't designed very well either. Because I'm like, what is that even supposed to be? It was stylized, but it was odd. I don't know. Just
maybe we missed the gag.
Yeah, that's why I kept looking at it. Like, what am I missing here? Is this supposed to be funny somehow, other than the owner being a woman?
Which is, I mean, hilarious. Just to think about, right? Ha ha ha.
Mr. V himself or herself is Claudette Nevins, who I thought was pretty good. There's this whole gag of her crushing walnuts that really never comes back for me. It's just, you constantly see her doing it, but it doesn't come back. It doesn't pay off. And that's what this whole episode is like a lot of setups without a lot of payoffs for me.
But there's a point where there's a ventriloquist doll that Leslie Nielsen has to fight. Isn't that funny? No.
And the ventriloquist doll is the one that gets the cigarette, yes, I know line.
Yes. Which
I did appreciate that.
That worked for me.
Yeah.
It worked that he was the one that said, yes, I know. I think the walnuts gag is a reference to something, I want to say, like either an old cop show or that was somebody's thing. I feel like.
Is she just a ball breaker? Is that what it's supposed to be? That's the way I had.
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking.
Right.
Oh, I just read on the source of all knowledge, Wikipedia, that it was actually Florence Henderson was the replacement for John Belushi. Yeah.
That Florence Henderson bit is still great, so it's not like they replaced it with a bad one.
Right.
It's not like they replaced it with the same gag twice or anything.
Exactly. Yeah.
ZAZ would never let such a thing happen on their show. Right.
What is there to say about this one? This one is really tough to talk about.
We had a hard time talking about the last one. Yeah. I was really worried halfway through the last episode of what this episode was going to look like, because this is worse than the last episode by a country mile and then some.
Yeah. I mean, even the whole thing with Mr. Olsen. Oh, here, Tina, give me your crying doll and I'll put it in this trash compactor. And then for some reason, it will rearrange the molecules of the doll so the arm is sticking out of the head.
And his line is weird, too. I don't get the line. Next week, we'll learn why cows look forward to giving milk. Is it a tit joke?
I think so.
They like being jerk. What's the jerk off joke?
Right, which doesn't make any sense.
Joke? Yeah.
I assume it's but here's the thing. It's like cows aren't coming from having. I'm not like I'm having to explain this.
I know.
Like, you guys are adults. You know that's not where the milk comes from.
Yeah.
Well, that's where the milk comes from, but you're not jerking a cow off to get milk. If this is news to someone, email us at cowmilkers@yahoo at weirdingwaymedia.com.
Are we supposed to assume that cows enjoy
the feeling of someone grabbing
like
their udders?
Women enjoy their breasts played with?
I think if a cow doesn't get milked regularly, it will start to hurt. The udders will start to hurt, but I don't get it.
I like you explaining it, Mike. Is you wondering what the explanation is funnier than the gag in the episode.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're just going, does that to cows and but too much milk? What do you do with all the milk?
Yeah.
There's sort of a repeat of it's not the rear or the green screen in the back, but Joey's drive where he's seen all the stuff after being poisoned is sort of a play on that. And I kind of enjoyed that, the disembodied skull. And then I used to watch Battlestar Galactica when I was a kid, so I recognized the Cylon spaceships.
Yeah.
And then the roller coaster, and then the Three Stooges at the end. I don't know. It's just a weird mishmash.
Speaking of rear projection, is this the episode that has the elevator gag, or was that the last one? And
they both had elevator gags.
Okay,
yeah.
that's what I thought.
And they were both.
Well, which is weird because, like we said in the last episode, these were shot out of order. So they would have had or wait, no. By now, I guess the 5th and 6th episodes, there we go, had elevator gags. It's like now they're relying on it. And then when we talk about the 7th episode, that had an elevator gag as well.
I think the Civil War gag is funny only because you have Ed Hawkins standing there when that arrow comes
right by his
real close.
Yeah.
Very close to him. And the end of the episode gag has a lot of similar things going on where it's like, I wouldn't want to be on set for that.
No.
Just like I wouldn't want to be on set with the chimpanzee. I wouldn't want to be on the set when it's falling apart intentionally.
I mean, this is the perfect place to end this. What with the set falling apart around their ears.
Exactly right. I wrote.
Yeah.
Kind of
poor
fitting.
Norberg. I mean, Norberg gets really smacked on the head.
Yeah, he gets it.
That's why he didn't want to do the movie, I bet. He doesn't want to get fucking injured while making another Naked Gun thing.
He's a skittish dude. He's the one that jumped during the shootout at
an abandoned key store.
Yeah.
What about my abandoned key store? Yes.
Man, remember when the show was good? Like 2 episodes ago?
Well, and then Joe Dante reminds us about it because Mary is in the car. At one point, he's like, I was driving home Mary, the boxer's wife.
From the second episode. Yes. Is that the other one that he directed?
Yes.
Because I was like, wait a minute. What? Why?
Because of the eyes, the cartoon eyes thing makes me think of Joe Dante.
That's right.
Eyes flipping around. Yeah. This episode doesn't have as much of that weird cartooniness, which frankly, all honesty, could have used it.
Yeah, it could have used more. I mean, like, I was hoping, like, so we see Joey get poisoned and he starts to have all of these hallucinations before he crashes his car. Later on in the episode, I'm thinking that Frank gets poisoned, but then he starts to spit all the stuff out so much that we take a commercial break and come back and he's still spitting the stuff out, which I kind of like that. But I was hoping, like, he would get poisoned at some point and then he would have hallucinations and then.
That wasn't Frank Drebin. That was Tony DeWonderful.
Yeah, that's true.
Mr. DeWonderful.
And Ed Hawken getting a signed photo.
That was so nice. I really liked the original guy who was supposed to be the entertainment and had taped a game off of TV. You know, well, it was just me. I just watched myself. Okay, yeah, I invited some friends over. Yeah, I charged them $2.
and they have Al North doing the whole bit from the thing. You were watching a baseball game outside. It's like, God damn. I've never seen anybody do that joke before. It lands here. It actually works rather in a desert of jokes. There are a few oases. That is one of them. That and the try marrying that gag's pretty fucked up.
That gag is great. Yes. The stuff with the coroner doesn't really work so much for me. Oh, and please explain this one to me. Whose photo is that in the drawer that they're looking at and going, ugh?
I think it's Alexander Haig.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I think.
What a stretch for it.
This is way before David Zucker went off the deep end with the right wing stuff then. Wow.
I think it's him. And I didn't bother even to read the Wikipedia page because they probably would have.
I know Wikipedia that their page is bare, my friend.
Okay.
Yes.
They were so good with kind of laying out the jokes for most of the other episodes.
Oh, yeah.
But my energy was drained so much that I didn't even bother with the commentary. I didn't look up the Wikipedia page. I didn't look at the IMDb page. I just didn't care.
I do believe that was Alexander Haig, which is a hell of a stretch for a joke.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess at the time, right?
Yeah. I mean, people used to wear shirts that said, what was it? Oh, no, it said Meese is a pig, but it didn't say Haig. But people hated Alexander Haig as well. I remember I counted myself as one of them.
It's a weird picture to use, though, because it's like a mid-body shot. It's not like a portrait.
Close up. Yeah.
I would wager a guess that it was supposed to be something else, or there was something else. Because again, the way it's shot, it could be whatever. Yeah.
Right.
It literally could be them looking at a pile of rotting food, right? They don't even respond to it outside of just going, bleh. They probably just said, just act disgusted. And we'll put something in there. Honestly, it's the joke this episode deserves, because this episode really just like, we finished, getting over the finish line. It's like, no, this like not just limps over the finish line. This like having somebody else drag it across the finish. It's like someone attached your corpse to the back of a tow truck and they're towing your body across the finish line. It's not even trying. It's so bizarre to me how long we spend in a 25-minute episode. We spend 15 minutes in a nightclub, and 13 of those 15 minutes are not funny at all. It's just Leslie Nielsen goofing around, and they just filmed it. It's like Paul Feig stepped in for an hour and was like, let me show you guys a thing or two about improv.
Oh boy.
The lead up to that Alexander Haig gag, even with the toe tags.
Yeah.
So you go through the toe tags and they become, this little piggy went to whatever. And then that pile of bodies. And there's just like a cheap hunk of cardboard with irregulars or something written on it. Like, hurry, we need something to put on that pile of bodies to explain what this.
It was the 3, right? Like they had the one gag was the 2 left feet, and then the next gag was all the piggies being labeled, and then I guess the third gag was the miscellaneous body parts.
Right.
But it didn't, and they do that. I mean, the laws of threes are all through this episode, because there's also the thing of, gosh, what was it? Like what dangerous is that Frank says. It's what is dangerous is, oh gosh, because the third one, you take a chance getting up in the morning, you take a chance crossing the street, or sticking your face in a fan. So there's the third one with that one. Or there's when Dick Miller says to him, I've seen the greatest: Sinatra, Wayne Newton, Carl
Yastrzemski. Yeah.
So it's like each time they're doing like, and I think even with the hallucinations that Joey sees, but I think the hallucinations go on for too long. I think there's like 3 or 4 more.
At least 4.
Yeah, because there's a skeleton, the
spaceship,
Galactica. You're right.
Roller coaster, and the 3 Stooges.
Roller coaster, yes. Yeah. And it's like, come on, you got to cut it at 3. You can't have that last one in there.
Little self-restraint never hurt anybody, especially when it comes to comedy. Leave them wanting more. And that's, that is the thing about this show when people talk about this show. Because I've told some friends of mine that were working on this show, and they were like, oh my God, I didn't know there was a TV show. Or if they do know, but they've never seen it, they go, it's only 6 episodes. How is that possible? And my answer to both the people is effectively the same. It's because it doesn't really work. Even when it does work, it barely is working. Like this show barely works, even when it does work, because it's funny. When it's not funny, it doesn't work at all.
Yeah.
And the problem with this show is it is such a fine line at what's funny and not funny. And the moment they just start hitting X's, it's like you couldn't get a laugh out of me after you've failed so many times. I just can't laugh. I don't want to laugh. It's not funny. No matter what you do, you can't salvage how bad this episode has been. How many just missed jokes and missed opportunities there's been. Because to your point, Mark, about the irregulars thing, then there's a gag of them doing the thing that they've done before, similarly in the first episode with the corpse going in, and it's too long.
Yeah.
They have them sticking the corpses into the
shoving doesn't work.
It doesn't land at all.
No. I can't tell if it's because they're too close to them behind them, if it's the coroner and Leslie Nielsen are blocking it too much. It's blocked really weirdly. It's blocked out in a way where they're blocking the action you're supposed to find funny. And the problem is it's not even funny. You've done it before. And you kind of already did it in the scene because the thing that they're stuffing in has like 3 arms. It's that irregulars gag taken further. It's not funny either way. Why are you going all in on this gag that is not funny to begin with?
I was talking about the law of the threes. Where are you from, sir? Milwaukee. Oh, my hometown. Where are you from? Seattle. Hey, that's my hometown. Where are you from? Chicago. Hey, that's your hometown. Was not funny. Was not funny.
I laughed at that one.
Doesn't he ask another person, though, after that even? Doesn't it go on for another one?
It's implied to keep going on after the fact.
Yeah.
So
Jeez.
maybe your hometown one would have been the perfect spot to stop.
To cut that. Right. Exactly.
Because you've got the threes, plus you've also got, he's changed it up a little bit.
If you're interested in, keeping the flow of your episode moving and not bogging it down. But hey, Dick Clark is in this episode, so that's fun.
I kind of like that. And I like this whole thing of Johnny explaining ska. I thought that was probably the best explanation of ska I've ever heard.
The backbeat. They think they changed the backbeat.
Right.
But it'll never
still
catch
isolate
on.
the normies.
Yes. It'll never catch on. Oh, gosh. From your mouth to God's ears, Johnny.
What a shame.
Explain the Act 2 gag in this one for me, because this one I did not get.
Oh, what
Act
was
2 Lieber?
Oh, it's Actu Liber.
Okay.
To
yeah.
Liba,
Yeah.
Got it. Now I got
I
it.
only know that from playing Wolfenstein.
To Liba. I mean,
Yeah, I get that it's German, but I'm
Right.
not. Does that mean Act 3 in German or Scene 2 or Scene 5 or something?
most of those Act 2 gags have to be said out loud.
Oh, yeah.
That is
Yeah.
what I appreciate about them. That is kind of the sharedness of the gag, is that they keep doing the same thing. Act 2, Gesundheit. Like, though, this is like the logical. This episode just feels like the logical conclusion.
It does. Yeah.
The way, there's no other way this show could end other than the way it ended, which was to just like fall apart
Yeah.
around the actors.
It feels like they knew, even though they didn't, but it feels that way. Like I said, I think first episode, or maybe in the airplane episode, I can't imagine this going for 22 episodes. Like a normal
Oh,
season of
holy
TV
shit.
back then was at least 20 something episodes.
Yeah.
Not as a live action show. I've essentially gone on the record, I think in the second or third episode, saying this is very similar to The Simpsons. A lot of the things that we see in this show would have worked better in an animated format. This show would have killed as an animated show. Oh my God. There are shows on like this now. There are shows where the bumbling hero is, doing weird things like Archer, for fuck's sake. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm not saying Archer is like Naked Gun, but it kind of is Naked Gun. The Naked Gun setup of the bumbling idiot
Right.
that's your hero. That's what Archer is. It's kind of the same thing. So if you had a Naked Gun cartoon, that would have been something really exciting. But this show, just, my God, what a insurmountable amount of work you have to do on every episode to get it right. It's like writing a movie on every episode. The amount of fine tuning that this really takes is not for the faint of heart. And I'm really surprised that ZAZ were up to this task. But I don't think they really were. I think they were up to it for the movies. Even then, it's diminishing returns in that regard for those. And we'll see that when we get to the movies. Because this doesn't feel like the same show that we started with. It really
No.
doesn't.
No.
And that's what I remember from that first watch all the way through just a couple years ago. Like, boy, it went downhill rapidly. By the time you hit that 5th and 6th episode, it's hard for me to remember how good the first and second episodes were. And especially that first episode.
I found myself quoting these a lot less as they went along. And with this one, I wasn't quoting this at all. There was no time where I was just like, oh, he's going to say this and say it along with the screen kind of thing. No,
Yeah.
not at all. I mean, it could be the last 2 aired in July, a few months after the other ones. They're basically buried. And so maybe I missed them the first time around and didn't watch them, and memorize them when I was a kid, but they just didn't hit.
That's the term I would use. If you're airing it however many months later, they buried it. They might as
Yeah.
well stuck it at Sunday night at 6 p.m.
Exactly.
Just give it the kiss of death way. You know what? Set it during any major sporting event. Like Thursday night, say at 7 o'clock. Do that and see how many people tune in. But to be fair, if you're watching along with us, honestly, the show does a pretty good job of showing you why it only ran 6 episodes. Like, if you get to the end of this episode and you want more, were you paying attention? Like, I can't imagine as the studio execs at the time watching this and going, yeah, I don't think we need to see any more of this, guys. Like, you guys want to do like long form? Sure. But this truncated format ain't working. Obviously, the reason we get the movies is because this just doesn't work. And it's not like the movies wait 20 years to come out. It's like 6 years, 82 to 88. And then the movie comes out in 88.
Well, they do Top Secret in between.
Right. But then they come back to this. I mean, again, this was a viable idea, clearly, to them, at least one worth remining. I have to wonder what ZAZ's response, because we don't have the commentary for this episode with them. It's with Mr. Talks a Lot. I can't imagine they watched this and went, oh, this is great. This is in keeping in line with our original vision.
Right.
Run.
That commentary from the 5th episode, though, sort of covers the whole thing where, like, it's too difficult to get everybody on the same page and have people that approach comedy differently. Nowadays, you've got these writing rooms and you have the Bible for the show and all this. You know, I'm just thinking of those Mike Flanagan Netflix shows that have a bunch of different directors and writers for episodes, but they all have the same. I mean, there are going to be some touches that are specific to a director, but you don't go away thinking, oh, this person didn't understand what the point of this show was. Like here, it seems like the writers and maybe even partly Joe Dante didn't understand the ZAZ model. You kind of think you do because you might have a visual pun or you might have one of those literalisms, but it's just not quite right. So I think they would have had to have either been more involved or written all the episodes or directed all the episodes or something. That's a lot of work for, for people who, for one thing, weren't familiar with TV work up to that point.
It doesn't feel like they had a strong showrunner, No.
Well, I was going to say, look at something like David Lynch's 3rd season of Twin Peaks. We're talking about Twin Peaks before we start recording, right? There's no fucking way I thought Lynch was going to be involved with every episode. He was, but yet the show feels like a singular, cohesive idea that is in line with the first and oft maligned 2nd season, rightfully, of the show. If you were making this now, ZAZ would have to be involved completely. I would never sign off on this project with somebody else other than the 3 of them involved from A to B to C to D, because this is what happens. This is exactly what happens. You have people who come in and go, well, I saw Airplane. Yeah, me too, but I'm not going to go fucking write Airplane. If it were the 3 of us tackling this, I think the way to tackle something like this is write a script for an episode of Felony Squad or M Squad. And then once you've done that, go back in and find the comedy in that,
right?
Because that's what fucking Police Squad is. That's what it has been. It's about playing it straight, but making it funny because of how ridiculous it is on its own. Not, well, here's some dumb fucking gags that we came up with that don't fit here, that don't fit within the context of the story that's being told. And that ultimately, in my mind, is why these last 2 episodes have really failed, is they don't even feel like this is the same show. If you can't even place me in the show that I'm already in with some markers that I recognize, you failed right out of the gate.
Well, it's very strange because Robert K. Weiss produced all of these, and
right.
I would consider him probably the showrunner. Then you also had David Mish, who's the executive story editor for all of these as well. And then it's so strange. I know we'll talk about this in a little bit here, but the 7th episode that wasn't produced, wasn't ever made, was a David Mish script. And I think he wrote it along with Wool and Sana again. And it is so not a Police Squad script. It doesn't follow the rules of Police Squad. So it's like, well, what are you doing? If you can't even follow your own rules, and this episode is kind of like, we are starting to veer way off course with this stuff. And I don't know if it's Mish's fault or Weiss's or whose, or just was nobody at the tiller with this stuff. Was ZAZ looking at something else by this time already? But we're 6 episodes in. Come on, guys. You really got to keep looking ahead and seeing where you can go with this thing, because they're about to, if this 7th episode ever got made, they were going to just veer right off of a cliff, just like Johnny or Joey. Sorry.
I was reading a book that you sent me recently, Mike, that had your essay about Airplane 2 in it. And it kind of brought an interesting question into my mind. Could an Airplane TV show have worked? We've seen what they did with Airplane. We will be seeing where they go with Police Squad, but it begs the question, does the ZAZ style work as a TV show to begin with? That's why I asked, could there have been an Airplane TV show? I think the answer is an unequivocal no, looking at how this show is. And I wonder why ZAZ wanted to do a show to begin with. Because I can't imagine the three of them sitting in a room together and going, we're setting somebody else up for success by having such a specific and unique style that is very hard to replicate. And then we're not doing anything with the show other than created by. How are you setting the show up for success by not being involved with it? Your essay on Airplane 2 gets to the idea of why Airplane 2 in and of itself is a weird thing. It's somebody trying to copy ZAZ, just like these last 2 episodes and technically 5 of the 6 episodes are trying to copy their style to varying degrees of success. But I would contend nothing past the first episode of this show has really been that successful comparatively. I'm not saying to take the whole show and throw it out, baby, with the bathwater, but just like 1 or 2 good episodes. And I think for the most part, everything else is just kind of the same thing over and over again.
I mean, now you're looking for the jokes. You're just like, oh,
right.
I haven't had a joke in a while that I've laughed at. Whereas the first couple episodes, yeah, it's just like joke after joke after joke. And it's kind of like Airplane where you're almost gasping for breath because there's so much funny stuff.
Don't give me an opportunity as an audience member to stop laughing, really.
I did like the bit with the car.
It's so French Connection.
Yes.
I really like what they're doing there.
That's what I was like, okay, how are they going to riff on that? Because they have to put that whole car back together in the French Connection in that quick time to get it back to those guys. And, you missed that whole part of it of them pushing off the guys that are trying to pick up their car at the impound and saying, it's been misplaced. We don't know where it is or whatever they're doing to. So none of that's in there, but I thought, okay, this is obviously what they're riffing on. The glove box joke comes back in a way with the Coke was right here in the glove box. The car is all torn apart and they put it back together, but they have a few spare pieces and it's a totally different, instead of a sedan, it's a coupe or something. A totally different make and model and size.
That was kind of nice. Yeah. It's shrunk by quite a few feet because they really do make a great point of like, look at this Continental. And then
right. And then it's a little sports car. There was one gag and I don't quite, I get it, but I liked it just for its odd nature. When Drebin is talking to Mr. V, they do the close-up thing, but it's not a close-up of her eyes. It's a close-up of her nose.
Yes. That quick.
The quick jump cuts into a zoom. For whatever reason, that one tickled me. As well as Norbert getting stoned.
Yeah. For no reason other than just cuz.
And not really doing what you do when you're high on Coke. He gets the munchies, and that's not a Coke thing.
I'm like,
I know what that's like
right now. Yeah.
Wrong one, bro.
Yeah, that was really strange. And this is 1982. They know what cocaine is doing. He should have been like rubbing his teeth and all that stuff and super jittery. I mean, you mentioned in the last episode, they knew John Belushi, so they know what a coke addict looks like.
Yeah. They know about 8 balls. There's no way they don't.
Exactly.
The whole bit with the docks, you'll have to get my car at the docks.
That was nice.
That was nice. And then it comes back to where not only is that a throwaway gag, but the doctor is implicated in this whole drug thing. So they have to go back and arrest him. Those couple of things.
In the middle of surgery.
In the middle of surgery, of course. And the patient flatlines.
Right.
Yada, yada. That's about all I got out of this one.
So for me, one of my favorite lines was one of the last lines of the episode where he's like, well, Frank case is all wrapped up. Veronica Rivers confessed to killing Joey Coldis, and we've got her and Vic and the Frenchman on the dope smuggling rap. And from now on, they'll be up there together in Statesville prison. Yep, right along with Martin and Dutch and Lana, Thames, and Sally Decker. Yeah. It's like, there you go. I love it. That's what I was waiting for. It's just every episode, give me more. And again, he fucks it up in that script for the 7th episode. He actually says, from now on, they can peddle their corruption at Statesville Prison along with Martin, Dutch, Lana, Thames, Sally Decker, and Veronica Rivers. And it's like, no, you always end with Sally Decker.
Yeah.
For fuck's sake. Don't you know your own fucking show?
Well, this show was canceled too early, Mike, okay? You don't understand. This show was canceled too early by ABC, okay? And you know why they canceled it? Because the viewer had to watch it in order to appreciate it. That was their reasoning. No, their reasoning should have been is because the show wasn't very funny anymore. And if people have a problem with that being the reality, go watch the show. This is our opinion, sure. It's very apparent where the show was heading with the unproduced 7th script. I genuinely believe the show was going to get into weird parody territory, and it kind of got there where they were going to have, we're going to have Ironsides. We're going to have Perry Mason as character. We're going to have, if the show had kept going, we'll have a Columbo character.
Uh-huh.
And I feel like this is where the show was headed. And that kind of tracks because that's not fucking Naked Gun at all.
No.
That is Scary Movie. That is Murder by Death, even.
Uh-huh.
Watch it.
But that's good. I'm not
The parody part.
I'm not comparing quality because Scary Movie is a good movie too. Them doing this kind of thing in this show is not Naked Gun. It's something else.
I'm assuming we're getting into that 7th script now.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
So I have a really big problem with, for one thing, introducing a chief that's never been mentioned previously. So that's the first thing that threw me off.
Like Mike said, know your fucking show.
Right.
He's a riff on Ironsides. Did they mention, maybe I missed it, did they mention that he's in a wheelchair
I don't think they do. I think it's just that they turn him into an iron block.
Yeah. And he's like smashing and hitting people.
Right.
Right. But it's that literalism of his name being that and him getting turned into that
Right.
also doesn't work for me.
They mentioned in a note throughout the scene, Iron Block is viewed in close-up or from behind. So I wonder if...
Right.
In my mind, this is what I would have done. I would have had a different actor in the wheelchair than the actor that is portraying Iron Block and never showing his face. But I also wonder if that's supposed to be a Blofeld gag, because they have shown that they're not above doing James Bond gags. Not that it's a bad thing or anything, but it made me wonder either they were going to have a different actor in the chair with close-ups or they were going to have a Blofeld thing where they never see his face, because they mentioned it's in close-ups or from behind. So maybe, I don't know, it's fucking weird just that's like first page. First page, like right.
There is a runaway wheelchair gag, though. I just remembered there's a runaway wheelchair gag, and I assume that that's him in that. I wonder if that's what they repurpose for the wheelchair gag going down the steps at the stadium in whichever Naked Gun one that's in, when he goes jettisoning off.
Yeah. I mean, like, I honestly thought that this was a fake script. Like, I had to go out to David Mish's website. I had to go to his Twitter. I had to look and make sure that this was like the real David Mish. And yeah, he talks about how he produced the episodes and how he wrote this one. And it's legit, which is just bizarre. Absolutely bizarre. Like, even the subtitle, A Kitten for Amy. There is no Amy in this episode whatsoever. And I understand that, like, the subtitles don't necessarily line up with the episodes. That's kind of one of the jokes, but there's nothing in here. It's just, it feels so throwaway all of the time.
Those subtitles relate, like Dead Men Don't Laugh. Like, that's like a noirish title. Usually the one that's on the screen is the one that, like The Butler Did It. Is The Butler Did It. A Bird in the Hand doesn't make any sense really in that episode, but it's one of those.
It's a non sequitur.
It's one of those common crime story titles.
Right.
Or maybe I'm missing the Kitten for Amy thing.
Yeah. I thought that the fake title was funny, but I also find humor in the stupidest shit. So there is that. I personally think that, or I'm actually walk this back. I'm shocked that the act gag in the script wasn't actually used in the show. The act 2 gag in the script is act 4, 3, sorry. That I'm surprised that didn't have a spot in the show. Mm-hmm. But then you come off of that and there's just all these, like, it's a big fat 0. What's that? It pulls out a giant zero. Like,
Right.
right when you do something good, you just start hamming it up with literalism. And I can imagine them just hamming for the camera because that's where we are now with this.
So we should say that this iron block gag is that the chief gets crushed in this car and that they then end up using that in Top Secret. And it's pretty funny, but it's basically like one joke. It is Omar Sharif gets crushed in that car, and then the next time you see him, the door opens and he comes stumbling in, these little legs and this big metallic block that lands, and they go over to him, are you okay? All this stuff, oh, it's in my left pocket. And then you hear the horn go. And then at one point you see the antenna go up to indicate that he has an erection or something. You get all this kind of stuff. It's one gag. It's not 25 episodes of a TV show, because this gets really tiresome really fast. They have and then they break. Like they've got in Olsen's bit, he shows them a film strip about
Iron Blocks
people. Yes. And then when he goes to Johnny, it's Johnny and Iron Block, and Iron Block starts telling Johnny, I need that information right now. And he's like, no, let me handle this. And they gives Johnny money. There's no second person that comes, or third in this case, that comes to the shoe sign stand. You lost that joke too. Even Olsen beforehand, sorry, I'm vacillating between both of them, but Olsen is like, oh, here, I'll show you how nuclear energy works, but yet it doesn't endanger the kid that much. And I'm like, no, everything is supposed to put these poor kids in danger, and it's supposed to be very inappropriate and all this. Yeah. And it's not.
That's why when you messaged that it seemed like a fake script, that's all I could think about it because I was halfway through reading it and had just gotten to the lab scene. And I'm like, this nuclear experiment thing doesn't make any sense.
No.
Compared to previous episodes at all. The film, they've looked at film before, but to take that literalism so far as to this squishing thing is a problem, and there are people around the world that live as iron blocks, or they continue it with the therapist with iron block. It's only a page long, but it's a slog to get through. What is the purpose of continuing this joke so far into the episode, instead of it being he's a block for one scene and then the next scene he's back to normal,
right?
Which is what they would have done in a movie. There doesn't need to be continuity throughout,
with Leslie Nielsen's nose in Airplane,
right? Exactly.
Right. Or them being on instruments for a second of the movie.
Where you take that chief and you just push him right out of the story. He comes back later and he has found true love, and it's a woman who's an iron block at the same time.
Yes.
Something like that.
Well, again, I think it just speaks to where the show is at this point, right? It's lost its way. There's nobody who has the show's best intentions in mind is at the wheel here. If this is the script that they were going to produce, I'm really glad we don't have to watch it.
Oh, yeah.
I'm glad that we're reading it. I'm glad that it exists in the world to read, but I am so thankful that it was not actually turned into an episode, because there's very little to say about it as a script. There would be even less to say about it as an episode.
You get the running gag of the little newsboy who is narrating basically, and there's this whole thing of he knows as much as we as the audience know, and he's like, extra, police baffled, blah, blah, blah. And it's okay, that's kind of funny, but that's the extent of the humor in this script. There was no place where I was just oh, that would have really worked. Like I said, the block thing works in Top Secret when you have it for one scene. Doesn't work as a full police thing where you just completely lose the thread of what we've seen in the show before.
If Columbo was in the show, it would be a guy dressed up like the country of Colombia the entire time.
Or Christopher Columbus. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, there it is. There you go. That would have been funny. The fact that the final credit roll has the Iron Block character as part of it goes to show you that just you don't understand what you're being asked to write here. You're being asked to write jokes that are different, that are funny, that can relate to each other, but don't have to. You're not being asked to write a fucking through line through the entire episode. None of the other episodes have done that.
Right.
None of ZAZ's other stuff has done that. even in something like Airplane, the running gag shows up 3 times.
Right.
The guy in the taxi, the guy in the taxi again, and then the guy at the taxi at the end. It's not every 2 fucking seconds we're getting a check-in with the guy in the taxi. And that's what the Iron Block thing reminded me of. It's like, you don't need to keep reminding me and inserting him in. Frank Drebin is the funniest part of the show. Don't try to have him share the space with somebody else, please.
Exactly. Or have it happen to Nordberg or something.
Right.
You know? Even the epilogue is 3 scenes. The epilogue is always 1 scene. The epilogue is them wrapping it up and having the freeze frame. But instead, it goes from police squad room to an auto junkyard back to the police squad room. And it's like, what are you doing? You cannot do that. I mean, you are breaking your show's rules left and right.
That's what would have continued to happen. It would have, the show at the end, if it had lasted, even if it was a half season, 13 episodes, that 13th, 22nd episode, whatever, wouldn't have had hardly any connection with the first as far as the setup. Like you said, Chris, keep mining those old TV shows like they did with the M Squad. They took that whole framework and just changed things like bookie to an orthodontist. That's the joke. Right. Take those really dry, dull tropes from those shows. So I guess this is more like, okay, well, you know, the show Ironside, the guy's in a wheelchair, haha. So we're taking that and turning it into a literal iron block. And I don't know how many times they punch that line like, you're literally a 2,500 pound block of iron. Oh, that's ironic. I mean, I think they have Drebin even saying that at some point. Oh, how ironic.
Right.
Hardy har har.
You don't point out the irony. You don't have a character pointing out the irony of your jokes in the show.
That's a different show.
Right.
Yeah. That's what I mean.
Show.
It would have ended as a totally different show.
Yeah. Well, I would contend it has ended as a completely different show.
It was definitely getting different.
Yeah. I don't know how far you guys looked into other police crime things. A recent one had Rashida Jones in it that ran for 4 seasons. I had not heard of it. Sounds interesting. Mm-hmm. And then there's one from 2012 with John Hannah in it, which is immensely interesting to me as someone who's a fan of
The Mummy.
Yes. The Mummy. I would be interested to see what their version of spoofing is of police procedurals, given that now the police procedural genre is so broad in what it encompasses.
You know what a huge Paul Scheer fan I am, but he.
Oh yes. Regale me with tales of how much you love Paul Scheer, please.
That's how I like to start off with almost every sentence. But he was in a very funny police procedural called NTSF SDSUV. So it was really playing on NCIS and CSI.
SVU and
yeah, all those things.
That was an Adult Swim thing, right?
It was an Adult Swim thing, and the episodes are nice and short and sweet. I can't remember how, I think they're 11 minutes long, and there's 39 of them. They ran from 2011 to 2013. And what's her name? Janeway. Kate Mulgrew is in there. She's fucking fantastic. Everybody that's in there. And I've only watched I probably watched 10 episodes because they're so quick and they go down so easily. And they parody so much of what we see on all of these other shows and just really amp up the ridiculousness. I thought it was pretty well done, what I saw. And that one I would say is as close to Police Squad as we're going to get for a long time. But I am curious about this John Hannah show for sure, because I always like when he shows up and stuff.
Fuck yeah, man. And it's got a great name, A Touch of Cloth.
Ooh.
Which is not, I don't think that's a term we Americans use, but touching cloth means like shit yourself. So I believe, right? Any of you international listeners correct me, but I believe touching cloth means like shit yourself.
It sounded kind of pervy to me.
The Angie Tribeca show sounds interesting just by the amount of like random cameos.
Angie Tribeca.
I watched the first one and I think it
was awful.
It was more like where this show was going.
Yeah, it was really bad. Yeah, I didn't try to watch that too.
And I'll watch just about anything she's in just to watch her. And I was like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to continue with this.
Yeah, that was real bad.
Huh. That's a
Yeah.
shame.
I mean, I wanted that to be good as well. And yeah.
I haven't seen it, but I have seen this and I know how bad this is. So yeah, it is a shame, but I think, now if this show were to exist, it would be like 10 minutes long, 13 minutes tops. It would be like a sketch show. I think you should leave Tim Robinson's show on Netflix. It's 13 minutes long. I don't need any more than that. You've taken all your sketches and you've done all of them, and then you've taken the ones that are the best ones and you're giving me like 5 of them. Awesome. Great.
That whole thing of we're looking for the people that did this as he's dressed in the hot dog suit and it was the hot dog car that smashed.
That's from
a
the
total
show.
Frank Drebin thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's from the show. That's one of the gags in the show. That's one of the 13, 14 minutes of the show is that. Like, that's all you need. The through line can be Frank Drebin. The through line doesn't have to be fucking plot. There doesn't need to be a plot. Yes, in Naked Gun, the movie, we're going to get a plot, but the plot exists to be the car that takes us through the land of the jokes. We don't give a shit what the kind of car is. We just want to be enthralled by all the funny laughs. And at the end of this, there was not a whole lot. There was no laughing at the end of this show. Just a lot of groaning. And that script, man. I think you're right. You imagine if we had to watch that episode?
Oh, no, thank you.
Jesus. Can you imagine what the iron block effect would look like in 82 on a TV show that's essentially on the way out, that's going to be canceled? But can you imagine how fucking atrocious the effect would be? Like,
I mean, it would look very similar to what the Omar Sharif effect is. But again, he walks for a few feet before he falls down.
That's
and
my
I think
point.
It's a little person inside.
This has to be like a more well thought out thing that they can shoot for 20 minutes or whatever the fuck it is. Oof. Yeah. Again, looking at all the stuff about the reappraisal of the show, because that's what we're doing, reappraising the show, obviously. The reappraisals of the show are interesting. They're very positive. This show should never have been canceled. Why was it canceled? I can't believe it was canceled. The top list of all the canceled too soon shows, this isn't like the top 10. Like, are you guys high on the cocaine that Nordberg was eating?
It didn't have a chance to get really bad. That's its saving grace. It was stopped before it did really tank, because I think it would have eventually tanked.
It's like a ravenous dog.
You can't keep up this level of comedy without a strong showrunner saying, okay, this is how. Can't have a storyline with a joke that's running throughout. One of the characters can't be the joke for the whole episode. That goes against these rules. That doesn't make any sense in this universe. Toss this script out.
Go write another comedic show if that's what you want to do. It's not Naked Gun, though. That's the problem.
Probably a lot of those people didn't see it when it aired. I don't even know if I saw the last 2 episodes.
Yeah.
As we know, it showed months later, and who knows if I even caught those. People are seeing probably the best of what it could have possibly been. Even then, only with 6 episodes, so 6 times 25 minutes, you're only talking about whatever that amount, not very many minutes.
Like 6 hours, right?
No, closer to
3. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I guess you're right. Yeah. So 2 movies worth, essentially.
Yeah, it didn't get a chance to get really bad, but even with that, with only less than 3 hours, the last half hour ain't that great.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The last 45 minutes ain't that great.
It's sad.
Well, it is, and what's going to be even sadder is, like I said, we're gonna get to the top of this peak again with the first movie, because the first movie has some pretty good moments, and I think overall, we're gonna 3 enjoy it. Even though, again, like you mentioned, Mike, it's like Doc Brown's fucking DeLorean. They're recycling a lot at the first movie and the second movie and the third movie, but the lows in the third movie are going to be like the lows here. You gave up. Whatever, like you made the third movie. You just had to go and make a third movie, didn't you? That's what this show feels like. It's like you just had to go and do more than the first episode. You could have just stopped at the first episode. I will say, if we're looking at this, I think what our suggestion would be, watch the first 4 episodes.
Yeah, I would say do that.
In the right order. First 4.
In the right order, yes.
Right.
Yes.
So 1, 2, 5, and 4. Because that's probably, you go by the titles of how they are on our show. Because we talked about them in the correct order.
And if you made it this far and watched those last 2 episodes, Sorry.
Heaven help you.
Yeah.
We know your pain, at least.
Yeah.
Not the worst 50 minutes of TV I've ever watched.
No. I saw the finale of Lost.
Yeah,
I was going to say, I watched the last episodes of Game of Thrones and Dexter.
So yeah, we know pain, and this is not nearly as bad as those, but they're still not good. And what hurts more is that those first few episodes were amazing.
First episode's fucking great. That first episode is as good as the first movie. This is 25 minutes long. Like, good God in heaven, guys. It's such a drastic fall. It's not like, the first 2 seasons of Tales from the Crypt are good, and then the 3rd and 4th seasons get dodgy, and then the 5th and 6th seasons are bad. It's like, 1 is good. Everything else, kind of take it or leave it, really. Like, even if you want to watch the first 4 episodes, go for it. But it really is like the first episode of this show is good. But that's also because the people who made everything else involved with this worked on that episode. They directed it and wrote it and everything else. They had their hands directly in it. So, of course, it was good. They're going to do with that everything they've done with Airplane and all the other things they've worked on. They're going to micromanage the shit out of it and make it as perfect as humanly possible. And that is not what we get with all these other ones. These are like first drafts. They have to be. At least that unfinished script's got to be an unfinished draft. My God.
Yeah.
It has to be.
I mean, again, go back and fix it to follow your own rules.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Well, that's just the most egregious of them all, is you not understanding the show that you're writing for.
Right.
Like, what the actual fuck is going on here? But yet somehow Leslie Nielsen still got nominated for an Emmy. So
yeah,
what do we know?
Well, we will be back next week to talk about the first Naked Gun film, which I think that's called The Naked Gun from the Files of Police Squad. And boy, oh boy, is it ever. So we'll be talking about that.
Who would remember, though? Who would remember all those gags
that's the
from
thing.
6 years earlier?
We're the freaks, Mark. We're the freaks that walked into The Naked Gun and said, oh, I've seen all these jokes before because I watched the show. We're in the minority, so, fuck us, right?
Well, and again, I mean, most people that you say about this property to don't even know there's a TV show. So there you go. Whatever, like, awesome. You don't know there's a TV show. And frankly, your enjoyment of Naked Gun, the movies, may be better off for it. We'll see. Because this is the closest I've watched the show to the movies ever. So we'll see if it negatively affects my enjoyment of Naked Gun. Because I will say this before we end this episode, I absolutely love Naked Gun. It is one of my favorite comedic movies. It has some of the funniest lines I can think of, including assault with a concrete dildo, Frank. That is one of the best lines in a movie. And I hope that this show doesn't retroactively affect my enjoyment, because it's gonna be a real bummer.
I don't think I've seen it since it played theatrically, so I'm excited to see it again after all these years. Hopefully I'll walk in and enjoy it more and see what good stuff they managed to cull from these episodes. But until then, Chris, why don't you tell people where everybody can be found here?
In the next 6 months, the three of us will probably be indicted for something. So San Quentin is where you can find...
No, Statesville.
Yeah, Statesville. Bellevue. I think Bellevue even gets a name drop in one of these episodes. Shout out to Barney Miller. You can find the three of us at weirdingwaymedia.com, which is the podcast network that we all post our shows on. Mark Begley's Wake Up Heavy, Mike White's The Projection Booth, and the Culture Cast are all there, along with a whole boatload of other things that you should be listening to if you're not already.
Hey folks, this is Mark with a programming change to note. We will not be back next week with the episode on the first Naked Gun film. Instead, please take a trip over to Mike's main podcast, The Projection Booth, where Mike, Chris, and I will be discussing Top Secret, the film that came between Police Squad the show and the Naked Gun films. And in true Projection Booth fashion, there is a whole slate of interviews lined up, including co-writers and directors Jim Abrams and David Zucker. So February 22nd, head on over to the Projection Booth, and we will be back on March 1st with our episode on the first Naked Gun film.
to tune in next week for another exciting story from the files of Police Squad.